Okay, welcome to week 2. This is Jawad Ahmed Fari. Thank you very much for coming in this early in the morning on a weekday. Let's start. तो आज का प्लान इज लिटिल डिफरेंट. हमने अब तक बहुत सारे काम किए हैं, लेकिन for today's class and for this specific week, the idea was to go deeper in the design document that you prepared for Scrabble. And on that design document, I think the biggest question that we have is कि जो आपने चीज सबमिट की अब तक, the material that you've submitted, does that go deep enough? And are there any things, any tools, any techniques that we can use to make them more robust, more effective, more detailed, and possibly even more? दो तीन चीजें अगर आप फ्रेमवर्क्स देखें जिन पे आपने अब तक काम किया है, तो within those frameworks you've got, I think you've got the first one that we did was input output process. याद है? So input and then output and then process. Do you guys remember that? Yes, sir. I think there's a small problem with the mic. Keeps on switching back and forth. So as part of our initial work, we looked at input output process. Then we looked at applying our second layer of tools, which was abstraction, decomposition, algorithmic thinking, design, and generalization. And आज हम एक और सवाल पूछेंगे, which is कि is there a better way? Is there a more visual way, a more natural way of looking at the specification of a system when we're trying to dissect it or at least get a better understanding of its scope? So ये game plan है. So इस game plan से पहले जो आपका अगले हफ्ते का काम है या इस हफ्ते का काम था जो ओरिजिनल साइन किया गया था वो ये था. इसमें आई थिंक एक अपडेट ये आ गया आपके पास कि इस वक्त जो क्विज है, आई वांट टू क्लैरिफाई दिस. आज जो हम काम करेंगे उस काम के बाद you will ultimately revise and resubmit your design document एक दफा और. So whatever we covered today, once you put that to work, you will find that your design document has possibly room for improvement. So you need to go out and do that. इसकी date मैं आपको बताऊंगा. This will be sometime next week. So it's not due over the weekend. It will be somewhere towards the end of next week. So that's one. जो मेरी स्टार्टिंग क्लासेस थी और पिछली क्लास थी उसमें आपसे कहा था कि आप अल्फागो की डॉक्यूमेंट्री देखें. अगर आपने नहीं देखी है तो यू डोंट हैव टू वॉच इट फॉर द क्विज. दिस विल नॉट बी टेस्टेड फॉर द क्विज. ये असाइन रीडिंग्स थी फॉर दिस वीक. इसमें से ये जो पीस था which was the fastest Scrabble program in the world, this was an important piece. If you had read it, that is great. If you haven't read it so far, it's okay. You don't have to worry about it. This will not be coming up in the quiz. What will be coming up in the quiz, which is planned for tomorrow, is you have a Saturday science slot. एक key change इस दफा which is very important is that there will be no retake on Sunday. So you only get one shot. There is a pre-release document that was sent out yesterday. Make sure that you have it and you've reviewed it. आज आपका primary objective is कि that pre-release package includes the instructions and guidelines for building a generic model. तो वो जो guidelines and instructions हैं वो focus करती हैं on word generation. That is the piece that we're covering. And I think from your perspective, what is important is to understand how does that model work. आज की class है that talks and walks through the process, the sequencing of building that model on paper or by hand. The Excel pre-release that you have shows you how to do it within Excel on an automated basis. तो वो मॉडल बना लें, उसकी ड्राई रन कर लें. उसमें अगर आपके पास टेस्ट केसेस हैं that are there in the pre-release, उस पर टेस्ट कर लें. जो टेस्ट केसेस प्री रिलीज के अंदर दिए हुए वो नहीं आएंगे, उसकी वेरिएशंस आएंगी. सो इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट दैट वंस यू बिल्ड द मॉडल यू आर एबल टू एक्सटेंड इट एंड जनरलाइज इट. ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट चीज है कि सिर्फ मॉडल बनाना जरूरी नहीं है. तो एक दो दफा छेड़ के देख लें, चला के देख लें. जो क्विज की विंडो है उसमें आपके पास इतना टाइम नहीं होगा कि आप उसको जनरलाइज कर सकें. दिस इज समथिंग दैट यू हैव टू डू before. अच्छा, so now जो क्विज की विंडो है, उस विंडो के अंदर आपके पास टाइम नहीं होगा कि आप इसको जनरलाइज कर सकें. So do this work before the window starts. And then आप पे जो साइन स्लॉट है, as per your instructions and as per your section, उस पे आपका क्विज हो जाएगा. Quiz is going to be on variations of your pre-read. So that's the quiz related information. आज का जो हमारा टॉपिक है वो टॉपिक ये है कि if we look at a different lens, and this is a lens that looks at actors, roles and behavior as a framework, तो हम अपनी अप्रोच को कैसे चेंज करेंगे? How will we update and modify that approach? जी, do you have a question? I was just giving you a heads up. जी, the instructions are the same for all sections. इस वक्त we are going to focus on the class. Once the class is done, then I will take questions on the assignment. So हमारी क्लास खत्म हो जाएगी मेरे ख्याल है 11:30 और 11:45 के दरमियान. उसके बाद I'll stay back for another 45-50 minutes and I'll take questions on the assignment itself. Okay? Is that all right, Iza? Does that answer your question? Right. Thank you. All right. Okay. So now coming back to आज का framework. आज का framework is actors, roles, and behaviors. And the idea is that if you think in terms of your Scrabble board, what are some of the entities or actors that actively play a role on the board? So take the example of word generation. ये word generation कौन करता है? Who does it? So when you think in terms of the AI that you're competing against on Scrabble, who does the word generation? और ये कैसे करता है? How does it? How is that done? Zaki, there is a recording that's going to happen that I'm recording. वो edit होके cut होके होगी, उसके बगैर recording नहीं होगी. So आप individually record नहीं कर सकते session को. Is that all right? Thank you. So now questions only on the material that is being discussed, not on the pre-release, not on the execution, not on things that are unrelated to the current topic. Alrighty, so actors, roles, and behavior. So now think in terms of word generation. How does the word generation piece work? And what is word generation? तो आपके पास एक slate है, for example. Let's go on to our slate. There you go. So ये आपके पास एक slate मौजूद है, right? अब इस slate के अंदर अगर आपने word generate करने हैं तो आपका तरीका और process क्या होगा? What is the model that you will follow to generate that slate? कैसे generate करेंगे? Approach क्या होगी? So one possible design is that you take each of these words. So you take M, O, O, E, N, T, and U. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And you use this to generate as many combinations possible of M, O, O, E, N, T, and U. So ये तो आपका वर्ड जनरेशन का एल्गोरिथम हो गया. लेकिन जब आप इसी चीज को, इसी कैलकुलेशन को, इसी पीस को स्क्रैबल के वाइडर लेंस में देखें एंड यू थिंक इन टर्म्स ऑफ एक्टर्स दैट आर प्रेजेंट ऑन दिस स्पेसिफिक स्क्रीन, तो कौन कौन से कैरेक्टर्स हैं, कौन कौन से एक्टर्स हैं दैट प्ले अ रोल? सो एक एक्टर ऑब्वियसली इज द प्लेयर, राइट? वन एक्टर इज द प्लेयर एंड द प्लेयर इज आउट ऑफ टू टाइप्स. एक प्लेयर आपका एआई है दैट यू कंपीटिंग अगेंस्ट, और एक प्लेयर आपका आप खुद हैं. सो यू आर द ह्यूमन प्लेयर, सो यू आर प्लेइंग, राइट? सो दैट्स टू प्लेयर्स. ये तो ऑब्वियस चीज होगी. इसके अलावा कौन है? So a player is somebody, a character is somebody, an actor is somebody who plays a role, who has some kind of a behavior, who does something, who performs something, or has something, who either performs an action or has an action performed on him or her. So उस context में अगर आप सोचें, take a second to think about this. Who and what would be the possible characters as far as this board is concerned, or this game is concerned, Scrabble is concerned. So yes, so the board is a actor, tiles are an actor, and random letter generator is also an actor. So when you say when you if you take it step by step, how is the board an actor? The board is an actor because there are actions performed on the board, right? And what are those actions? वो actions कौन-कौन सी? उनमें क्या-क्या खास बात है? So what happens to the board? So the board has tiles placed on it. That is certainly one thing. And who places the tile? The player places the tile. And then what do the tiles form? The tile essentially form your words. How do tiles form words? Because the tiles have been assigned a letter. How do words get a score? Because each word has a numerical score assigned to it. तो आपने board और tiles तो identify कर ली. What about the word? Is word also an actor? Or words also an actor? जो आप अल्फाज create कर रहे हैं या generate कर रहे हैं by combining these letters, are they also actors? Can they be classified as actors? Do they have behaviors? Do they have actions that they can perform? Are there roles that words play? What do you think? So very good, Daniel. That's perfect. So words provide anchors and they have a direct impact on what you make next, right? But what are words form of, right? So words are formed of, put this on the side, ताकि we can view this. So एक element is letter placement, एक element is perfect. Very good. अच्छा, so now आपने words भी identify कर ली, तो words एक category होगी. एक category आपके पास और है, और वो category है of stuff which is happening that we take for granted, that's happening in the background. So if you think in terms of the Scrabble game and the Scrabble AI, word score कौन करता है? There is a scorer, right? So is the scorer a character? Yes, no, maybe. Scorer is also a character. So हमारे पास scorer आ गया, board आ गया, words आ गए, letters आ गए, tiles आ गए. If you think in terms of the AI is like a broader concept. उसके बहुत सारे pieces हैं. There we go. The tile bag is also one. What else have we missed in terms of a list of characters? और कौन-कौन रह गया जो इसमें होना चाहिए लेकिन हमें नजर नहीं आ रहा, या हमने यहाँ पे अब तक प्लेस नहीं किया अपनी लिस्ट के ऊपर? So tile bag हो गया, tile bag हमने लिख लिया, tile bag हम लिख लेते हैं. Somebody who counts the tile, okay? So that's another piece. Premium tiles. So premium tiles are actually tile rack. Very good. So tile rack is also an actor. And then you've got what you just identified as premium squares. So if you think in terms of your premium squares are squares that are formed. ये आपका premium square है, ये premium square है, ये premium square, right? Premium squares are squares on the board. So the board is formed of individual squares or cells, and each of these squares and cells have a function. So there are normal squares and cells जिसमें आप सिर्फ let tile को place करते हैं, and जो tile का score है वो apply करता है. But there are special squares जहाँ पे depending on whether they are letter or word, they modify the score of a letter or a word. So there are special squares. So the board is actually made of special squares. और क्या है? So हमने tile rack कर लिया, tile कर लिए, AI कर लिया, words कर लिए, letter कर लिए, tile bag कर लिया, special squares कर लिए, scorer कर लिए, dictionary, very good, dictionary. So word bank. So word bank is another. The word bank or dictionary is another piece that could possibly be an actor. So you get the drift, right? So इस केस में अब आपका जो एनालिसिस का फ्रेमवर्क है, वो एनालिसिस का फ्रेमवर्क थोड़ा सा डिफरेंट इस तरह से है कि अब आप rather than looking at input output process or looking at जो हमने एब्स्ट्रैक्शन के टूल्स इस्तेमाल किए हैं, we want to take a look at it from the lens of actors, behavior, and roles. So if I move on to the next slide, you will see that there are multiple components and variations here, right? So आपकी जो लिस्ट थी उस लिस्ट में से कौन कौन से आइटम्स हैं जो यहाँ पे कवर्ड हैं. तो हमने बोर्ड कवर कर लिया, वी कवर्ड द बोर्ड, सो दिस इज देयर. स्क्वायर कवर कर लिया आपने, रैक कवर कर लिया, टाइल्स कवर कर लिए, वर्ड कवर कर लिया, डिक्शनरी कवर, टाइल बैक कवर. मूव इज मूव अ कैरेक्टर, is move a character? What do you think? Can we classify the move as a character? Is there a possibility that a move is a character? And the answer to my query is yes, because it changes the state. Perfect. All right. Similarly, there is something called a validator. So dictionary is आपके पास tool है. Dictionary भी is a character and an actor. But outside of the dictionary, there are other possible variations. There are other possible roles and functions that you can possibly bundle within the dictionary, but it may make sense to treat them independently as individual characters, right? And you will see other instances of this rule when we look deeper into the air. So move is a character, when I say not a character, is an actor. और मूव के बाद आपके पास स्कोरर है. सो दिस इज ऑल्सो अ पीस. My apologies, there you go, pen. So scorer is a piece, and then validator is something like a word checker. And इसका प्राइमरी ऑब्जेक्टिव ये कि आपने वर्ड जनरेशन से बहुत सारे वर्ड्स जनरेट तो कर लिए, लेकिन अब आपके पास अगला सवाल ये है कि क्या ये वैलिड वर्ड है. सो द कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ लेटर्स दैट यू जनरेटेड, इज दिस अ वैलिड वर्ड? And that so the word generator itself will generate the words, but the validator will make sure that the word is a valid word. फिर आपके पास एक वर्ड फाइंडर है. सो आपके पास डिक्शनरी है, आपके पास कॉम्बिनेशन है, आपके पास बहुत सारे पॉसिबल कॉम्बोज जनरेट हो गए. A word finder would most likely go through a given word and find out a word that you want to move. Then there is a word placer. आपने वर्ड बना तो लिया, लेकिन आप बोर्ड पे प्लेस कहाँ करेंगे? तो जो एक ऑप्टिमल प्लेसमेंट का क्वेश्चन है, दिस इज द क्वेश्चन दैट कम्स अप हियर. फिर एक हाईएस्ट स्कोरर है. व्हाट इज द हाईएस्ट स्कोरिंग वर्ड बोथ इन योर लिस्ट ऑफ वर्ड्स दैट यू जनरेटेड एंड देन also in terms of how you would place them on the board. So एक component, or if you think in terms of Scrabble as a game, Scrabble is essentially, and we've said this again multiple times in the class, Scrabble is essentially a game that is chess with word. So आपका ऑब्जेक्टिव है कि आप अल्फाज तो बनाएंगे, लेकिन आपका एक ऑब्जेक्टिव और भी है. वो ऑब्जेक्टिव ये कि ये जो आपके पास स्पेशल टाइल्स हैं, जो ट्रिपल वर्ड स्कोर्स हैं, यू वांट टू डिनाई देम टू योर अपोनेंट, राइट? एंड ये जो आपके पास लेयर है डबल वर्ड स्कोर की, यू वांट टू डिनाई दीज टू योर अपोनेंट. बट देन आउटसाइड ऑफ दिस यू आल्सो वांट टू डिनाई ये जो आपके पास सर्कल है ट्रिपल वर्ड्स का. अगर आप देखें, सॉर्ट ऑफ लेड आउट इन अ नाइस बाउंड्री. देयर इज अ outer boundary and then there is an inner boundary. ये जो दो boundaries हैं आपके पास triple letters की, you also want to deny these to your opponent. So if you think in terms of logic, सिर्फ अल्फाज नहीं बनाने, सिर्फ अल्फाज प्लेस नहीं करने, अल्फाज बनाने भी हैं, प्लेस भी करने, and then you have to execute them in such a fashion that when you look at the end result of how the state of the board changes when you place a word, a tile, or a letter on the board, you've not opened up the board. You want to restrict your competition from access to the special tiles, the special squares that we've identified. And they are laid out in a specific pattern, which then has a direct impact on how the board dynamics work, right? So ये आपका denial आ गया, And denial and filter again is a piece that work together. So denial would basically say, मेरे पास ये 100 moves हैं, इन 100 में से कौन सी moves हैं that make sense, कौन सी move हैं that make a lot of sense right now, but they would open up the board for you or for your competition. And then एक और है जिसकी हमने बात नहीं की, which is the timekeeper, the clock. So you have limited amount of time in which you can place a word on the board. You have to then make sure कि वो भी चल जाए. अच्छा, फिर ये intangible हैं that deal with the operation of the board. और ये आपके actors हैं जो हमारे सामने नजर आते हैं. Then there is the AI. How does the AI work? The AI works by looking ahead in the game. And we talk about what does look ahead mean. It works by simulating the game. It looks at the probability of winning. It looks at the board and tries to evaluate, okay, how does a word or a move change the state of the game, right? These are some really important and interesting questions that you want the AI to address and answer. तो हमने कैरेक्टर तो आइडेंटिफाई कर लिया, बट इसका बिहेवियर क्या होगा? बिहेवियर इज, हाउ वुड दिस इवैल्यूएट, हाउ वुड इट एक्चुअली इवैल्यूएट एंड फिगर आउट हाउ टू यूज दिस एंड हाउ टू वर्क विद दिस. अच्छा, तो हमारी क्लास है विजुअल डिजाइन की, राइट? एंड वी टॉकिंग अबाउट हाउ डू यू कम्युनिकेट दिस डिजाइन इन अ विजुअल फैशन. तो वही जो आपने पीछे स्लाइड देखी है, उस स्लाइड को आई हैव नाउ कन्वर्टेड दिस इनटू, so each of these boxes represents one of the characters that we've spoken about. So word bank represents the dictionary. Look ahead represents the character in the AI who's responsible for looking ahead and saying, अच्छा, इस वक्त मेरे पास ये टाइल और ये रैक है और ये बोर्ड है. If I pick this specific word, how does that word change how this game will be played 2, 3, 4, 5 moves down the road? And we'll look at a few examples of this a little later. To do look ahead correctly, you need to simulate the game because you don't know how or what tiles your competition is likely to get in the next few rounds. So you need to simulate that, right? And who do you simulate? You simulate players as well as their strategies. तो आप सिर्फ AI का गेम नहीं सिमुलेट करें, आपकी जो competing parties हैं उस गेम के अंदर आप उनको भी सिमुलेट करें. So these are what is this? This is again a visual representation of the character that we've spoken about. And then we dig a little bit more about what do we do with this. Similarly, अगर आप player पे आ जाएं तो ये हमारा player है. Player दो type के हो सकते हैं. Player could be AI, player could be human. What does the player do? The player plays the game where he or she plays the game on the board. How does he or she play the game? They play the game by placing words on the board. What are words? Words are a combination of letters or tiles, depending on what we call them. Where do we get these letters and tiles? We get them from the tile bag. How do we generate letters and tiles? How do we generate words from letters and tiles? We use the word generator for it. So this is from the perspective of AI. लेकिन आपका प्लेयर भी अगर है तो प्लेयर भी अपने जहन में कोई प्रोसेस तो चला रहा है ना. तो जो आप एक्सेल की शीट अभी बनाएंगे जिसपे आप काम करें वो भी इसी के लिए है. अच्छा, अब ये आप रखते कहाँ हैं टाइल्स और लेटर्स? ये आप रखते हैं रैक के ऊपर. इनको आप स्कोर कैसे करते हैं? एक कुछ रूल्स हैं जो स्कोरर इस्तेमाल करता है टू स्कोर ईच वर्ड both as a tile and once that word is placed on the board. When we place a word on the board, that counts as a move and it is scored by the scorer. Her move, every word that is generated, every word that has a valid placement, is that a good word? Is that a good move? We don't know. So there are certain heuristics, there are certain guidelines, there are certain rules, certain conditions, best practices, for lack of a better word, things that are considered possibly rules of thumbs that you can use as filters to decide whether this move, which looks like a great move, but is that a great move, or would it come back and bite you a little later down in the game, especially when that move opens up the board. फिर जो आपने वर्ड्स जनरेट किए उनको चेक कौन करता है? वैलिडेट कौन करता है? उसको चेकर करता है. जो आपका गेम है, जब आप डिसाइड करें कि आपके पास अगर 100 मूव्स हैं, 100 पॉसिबल वैलिड मूव्स हैं, उसमें से कौन सी मूव प्ले करनी चाहिए, ये मूव असेस कौन करता है? तो ये एक हाई लेवल पे तो फिल्टर करता है कि जी ये 15 मूव मैंने आइडेंटिफाई कर ली, बट उसमें से बेस्ट मूव कौन सी है, वो बेस्ट मूव ये डिसाइड करता है. डिनायल इज बेसिकली अनदर प्लेयर on the AI side, जिसका primary objective is to make sure that the competition is denied access to the board, is denied access to the tiles. So वो इन तमाम चीजों को, सिमुलेशन को और लुक अहेड को इस्तेमाल करता है to find out and figure out what is it that we need to do to make sure that our competing player, the competing player on the other side of the board, is not given access, cannot access the tiles that we want to restrict. And then all of this is controlled by the timer. So aapki move is limited by the amount of time you have. In the beginning of the game, you may have a lot of time. Towards the end of the game, you don't have as much time. So far so good? Fair enough? ये clear हो गया? समझ में आ गया? सवालात, questions, issues? Yes, no, maybe? Okay, perfect, very good. अच्छा जी, so अब अगला स्टेप हमारा ये है कि ये जितने हमारे कैरेक्टर्स हैं, जो हमने एक्टर्स आइडेंटिफाई किए हैं, जो स्क्रैबल के बोर्ड पे एक्टिव हैं, राइट? वी ऑल्सो नीड टू थिंक इन टर्म्स ऑफ के इन एक्टर्स को एनालाइज करने का तरीका क्या है. सो तरीका इज, पहला सवाल इज रोल्स. व्हाट आर द रोल्स दैट दीज एक्टर्स प्ले? तो क्या रोल्स हैं दैट दे प्ले, एंड इफ यू थिंक इन टर्म्स ऑफ दोज रोल्स, देयर वी गो. What do they do? Who do they play with? When do they play these roles? Are there any preconditions to those roles? Are there any post conditions that need to be applied when those roles are played? So take the simple example of placing a word on the board. Who places the word on the board? जो आपका ऑप्टिमल प्लेसर है, जो वर्ड प्लेसर का कैरेक्टर हमारे पास पीछे मौजूद था. Where is the word placer? Is there a word placer here? There is no word placer here. Was there a word placer here? There's a word placer here, right? ये जो word placer का कैरेक्टर है, this one, this gentleman, right? ये कैरेक्टर बोर्ड पे word place करता है. So कोई precondition है? For the word placer to place a board on for the word placer to place a word on the board, what does he needs? He needs the word, and he needs the state of the board, and he needs to have some kind of a look ahead outlook on कि अगर if I place this word is going to happen. तो ये precondition हो गई. And post condition क्या है? Once he places the board, once he places the word on the board, and he calls out his score or the word is scored, then the the move is locked. The move has to be valid. If the move is not valid, then he or she may lose their turn. So that's one part. अच्छा, sometimes they interact. हमने जैसे वर्ड प्लेसर की बात की, वर्ड प्लेसर किन के साथ इंटरैक्ट कर रहा है? वर्ड के साथ इंटरैक्ट कर रहा है और बोर्ड के साथ इंटरैक्ट कर रहा है और स्कोरर के साथ इंटरैक्ट कर रहा है. तीन चीजों के साथ इंटरैक्ट कर रहा है. वर्ड, बोर्ड एंड स्कोरर. इंटरैक्टिंग विद थ्री सेपरेट कैरेक्टर्स. सो वो जो एंगेजमेंट मॉडल है, वो एंगेजमेंट मॉडल क्या है? What happens when the actors engage with each other? And then what is the nature of their work? What are the steps and sequences in each of these instances? What happens to the characters that they engage with before and after? So aap mein se, I think somebody said this, and they caught it very early on. They said a move is a character because it changes the state of the board. So a board is an actor and move is an actor, and once the move happens, then the state of the board changes. Something has happened, right? So you need to use this also as a reference point for your analysis when you look at the engagement of these actors. फिर आपके behaviors हैं. So if you think in terms of word, right? तो word से related behaviors क्या क्या हैं? So एक is make word, एक is place word, एक is check word, then there is score word, then there is link word. And then similarly, if you think in terms of move, तो moves के behaviors क्या हैं? So select move, filter a move, validate a move, generate a move. If you look at tiles and words, score a tile, use tiles to make a word, link tiles, place tiles, pick tiles. And then this make word is also linked to this make word here above. Then if you look at special squares, the special squares where that modify the scores, usme you have double letter, double word, and triple word, right? These are behaviors. And then when you bring these things together, when you bring both of these two elements together, you can go out and dig a lot deeper. So for example, you look at just actors. Board, if you look at board as an actor, what are the attributes that describe the board? कौन कौन से attributes ऐसे हैं जो board को describe करते हैं as far as you're concerned? जी बताइए. So we're not thinking in terms of function and roles for a board. We're simply now saying what are the elements, what are the identifiers, what are the data points that describe the state of the board. ये आपका board था ना पीछे? There you go. There's the board, right? How would you describe this board in numerical terms? क्या क्या elements हैं इसके जो आप describe कर सकते हैं that would capture the state of the board? एक चीज हमें पता है, एक तो हमें पता है कि ये जो बोर्ड है हमारे पास, इसमें इतने स्क्वायर्स यहाँ पे 15 और इतने स्क्वायर्स यहाँ पे 15, तो इट्स अ 15 by 15 का बोर्ड, राइट? दैट्स वन एलिमेंट that describes the board. How many squares actually exist on the board? फिर there are special squares, तो ये special squares हैं board के, तो कितने special squares हैं board के ऊपर? कितने tiles हैं that have been placed on the board? Because of these tiles, how many of these special squares are still available, and how many of them are now in use or have been used up or have been activated and cannot be used again? These are all elements that describe the state of the board, right? So these are data points or attributes that you can use to describe an actor, define an actor, describe and define the state of the actor before that actor went through an engagement and had their state move from a pre-state to a post-state, right? So state transition karti hai, transitions from where it was before and it goes to a slightly different state which becomes a state afterwards. Is this point clear? Does this make sense? Very good, very good. Just checking feedback. Yeah, so tiles आ गए, size आ गया, coordinates आ गए, number squares आ गए, blank tiles आ गए, boxes available आ गए, squares आ गए. So I think the point that I want to emphasize, this is a really important point. The point is that each actor can be described by a set of descriptors. We can call them data points, we can call them attributes, we can call them elements, we can call them, whatever name that you're comfortable, you can call them that name. You use that to get a sense of how do these actors and characters change and transition from their current state to a future state. So actors can be described by their attributes, and the attributes are essentially a function of so actors can be described by their attributes. Actors perform work and they perform roles, but those roles ultimately end up in performing work, right? So what is the function of that work? What does that work involve? So for example, word generator, right? Word generator में क्या क्या functions हैं आपके पास? क्या क्या elements हैं? So एक सबसे important पहला element आपके पास क्या है? A word generator. So we're talking about word generation, right? In our word generation, the first step is generate combinations. The second step from our perspective, from our lens, is to filter out what we would call valid combinations. And valid combinations are essentially what? Valid combinations are words which can be found in a specified word bank. If a word exists in the word bank, it is valid. If the word does not exist in the word bank, it is not valid, right? So this is what? This is the function. This is the work that's performed by the word generator. What is the function performed by a word validator or a word checker? वो क्या करता है? तो मैंने आपको एक word दे दिया, right? For example, I tell you, I have a two-letter word, and that two-letter word is key. So QI or Z or ZI. ये दो words हैं. Are these valid words? How do I know? So I give these two words to who? I give these two words to my validator. What does the validator do? How does he or she validate the word? It checks against the dictionary. Very good. So it looks at the specified word bank and checks against the word bank. Perfect. All right. So, so you have a sense of the work function, right? So our function generally can be, so आपने जो पहला framework इस्तेमाल किया था for design purposes, right? The one that you had used earlier. What did that framework do? That framework said कि input क्या है? For any function that we are working on, we look at a simple lens, and that lens basically says कि input क्या है, output क्या है, और process क्या है. ये तीन चीजें हम track करते हैं. तो अगर आप फंक्शनल लेवल पे आ गए, फंक्शन essentially comes down to what level? This is the lowest level. This is the implementation slash execution level. So implementation slash execution level के ऊपर आपका primary objective is to break it down into the input output process side. Analysis side पे you're looking at characters, roles, behaviors, engagement, actions, states, transition of those states. But at the function level, you're looking at input, output, and process. So here there is a hierarchy. So relationships basically describe, is there a connection? Is there some kind of a connection between elements or actors or characters in the scope that you analyze? For example, word bank. What is the word bank formed of? The word bank is formed of words. What are words formed of? Words are formed by letters. What are letters formed of? Letters are formed of tiles. What is this? This is a hierarchy. So word bank में क्या पढ़ा हुआ है? Word bank में words पढ़े हुए हैं. Words कहाँ से आते हैं? Words आते हैं. Letters कहाँ से आते हैं? Letters आते हैं. Tiles. Similarly, board. What is the board made of? The board is made of squares. And squares are of two types. One is a regular, normal, ordinary square. And so there is an ordinary square, and then there's a special square. Does that make sense? So आपने डेटा कर लिया, आपने वर्क कर लिया, आपने फंक्शन कर लिया, आपने हायरार्की कर ली. अब अगला एलिमेंट क्या है? एंगेजमेंट. Engagement is essentially interaction between actors. And what does the interaction do? The interaction changes the state of both actors. The engagement changes the state of both actors. So my actor is a move. What does the actor do? The actor move places a word on the board. Now, when that actor places the word on the board, what happens to the state of the board? Board की state change हो गई. Now it has more tiles on it. One, right? जो player है, player का state change हो गया. Player का state क्या है? Player की state is score, so player का score change हो गया. Player के पास एक और भी चीज है उसकी state के अंदर, which is the rack of the player. तो वो rack change हो गया. तो आप you can now see there is a change in the state of both the player, the word, the tile, the letter, the tile bag, the rack, and the score. And so a simple interaction and engagement may actually lead to a scenario where you may, by making a simple interaction or engagement, you may end up with changes that have an impact across the game. So engagement and interaction essentially leads to change states. ये आपकी sequence है from the perspective of both analysis and thinking when you analyze, dissect, and try and figure out कि आप जिस चीज को देख रहे हैं उसको decompose करने के आपके पास क्या possible तरीके हैं. How do you make all of this come together? How do you make sense of this? This is where the visual storytelling piece comes into play, right? So these are stories, and there are many words for how do you tell these stories, but this is a story that combines a list of actors and their behaviors to walk you through a sequence of actions that they perform. So जब आप बात करें ना कि word how is different from the word generator validating words, यहाँ पे जो सवाल आता है वो सवाल ये आता है कि जो आपका वर्ड जनरेटर है उसके साथ आप क्या करना चाहते हैं. डू यू वांट दैट वर्ड जनरेटर डू एवरीथिंग, or do you want that word generator to focus on just generating words? And then you create a special function which is the validator. So the validator is only good at doing one thing, and that is searching. I don't know how many of you have seen Tron, the movie. There are two Trons. There's the original Tron, which is from the 80s, and then there is a second Tron, which is Tron Legacy. कितने लोगों ने Tron देखी है? How many of you have seen Tron? How many of you have heard of Tron? Tron नहीं देखी आप लोगों ने? Tron Legacy भी नहीं देखी? Tron का नाम सुना है? Tron का नाम नहीं सुना? Tron is Tron. Tron. This is very sad. I must fix this. चल okay. So जब हम मिलेंगे when we meet in the physical world, in the real world, we'll talk a bit more about how does Tron. G electric bikes wali, but it wasn't actually electric bikes. But yes, you got the right concept. They were electric bikes. Okay. अच्छा जी, so now what are the stories? How do you tell stories? So अब आप इस केस में देखें, this is a story. This is actually a collection of stories. पहली story क्या है? Players and word together make a move. So the story is two characters, two actors. Pehla character is, let me go back here. There you go. पहला character is player, दूसरा character is word. ये दो actors हैं यहाँ पे. And यहाँ पे I have a third player, and that player is move. See, the question is, yes, that's the right one, Zayed. Okay. So now players and word make a move. How do they make a move? They make a word. So they make a word. They make a word. Then they place that word. But where do they place that word? They place that word on the board. When they place the word is checked. If the word is valid, the word is scored. And then that word becomes the link, a possible link to other future words that everybody else can play, right? So who does this? The players and words together make a move, and that move essentially involves these behaviors. So far so good. Now when you play the move, how does the move work? The move works by first making this word, which is this piece, and then using this function called place word to place that word. Where do you place the word? You place the word on the board. And what is the board? The board is a collection of squares and tiles. So right now we just started with one character, which is player and word. So two characters. And our story started with another character, which was third. So two characters, players and word engaging with a move. But then very quickly we've added a fourth character and a fifth character and a sixth character and a seventh character. So फिर क्या करते हैं हम? तो जब हमने मूव की बात की, ये जो हमने मूव की बात की, ये मूव में क्या क्या हो रहा है? तो मूव में क्या हो रहा है? मूव में हमारे पास पहले आप एक मूव जनरेट करते हैं, फिर आप उसको वैलिडेट करते हैं, फिर आप चेक करते हैं कि जो हमारे फिल्टर्स लगे हुए हैं कि ये अच्छी मूव है, बुरी मूव है, स्कोर अच्छा आएगा, बुरा स्कोर आएगा, बोर्ड खोलेगा, बोर्ड बंद करेगी, डिनाइल करेगी, नहीं करेगी, ये तमाम फिल्टर्स लगाने के बाद हमारे पास कुछ कम मूव्स बच जाती हैं, उसमें से हम एक मूव सिलेक्ट करते हैं. And how do we execute the move on the board? We pick a tile from a rack, then we place that tile on the board, then we link this tile to the next tile, and together this sequence of actions makes a word. When the word is done, then we score each tile individually because we want to score the word, right? So अब जब आप tile, squares और board की बात करते हैं, तो you need to also think of two more actors, which is number 8 and number 9. ये कौन से characters and actors हैं? These are special tiles and scorer. Special tiles and scorer कैसे काम करते हैं आपस में? They work together by essentially doing what? By essentially looking at a tile and then identifying whether that is a regular tile or whether that is a tile that is a modified tile. So it could be a tile that has a double tile score or double letter score. It could be a tile that has a double word score, a triple word score, triple letter score, or a triple word score, right? These are the modifiers. So this is an instance of doing what? Of changing your analysis to a point where rather than looking at input output process or standard simplified decomposition techniques, you are trying to look at actors, roles, behaviors. एंड हम जब कहानी स्टार्ट की थी हमने कहां से स्टार्ट की थी हमने कहानी स्टार्ट की थी ना वेरी नॉन विजुअल फैशन हमने यहां से कहानी स्टार्ट की थी दिस इज नॉट विजुअल एक्टर्स इंटेंजिबल एआई राइट दिस इज नॉट विजुअल ये तो हमने लिख दिया ना सिर्फ अब आपने कहानी सुनानी यू हैव टू कन्वर्ट दिस इनटू a story that both you your users and your own thinking can convert and translate into actionable items that can ultimately someday at some point in time convert into code. How does that happen? That happens by converting this into a visual template and format. So आपने जितने actors थे उनको आपने individual entities बना दी, boxes बना दिए, डब्बे बना दिए. And then what did you? Then you identified behaviors for those entities. Then you figured out how does those behaviors, how do those actors engage and interact, and how does that change the state and transition of your model? Does that make sense? समझ में आ गया? Here's a really important question. Do you understand what we've done well enough for you to go back to your design and update and modify your design? That's the real question. So we've explained it, you've heard it, you've seen a visual representation of that. But do you understand it well enough for you to be able to go back to the design that you've submitted last night or yesterday or this morning and be able to update and change it? इतना समझ में आया इतना समझ में नहीं आया यहां तक आप पहुंचे या नहीं पहुंचे yes no maybe yeah okay all right so a couple of questions एक सवाल है इसके आप एक दफा और repeat करें तो let's just repeat this one more time let's just walk through this very quickly and then figure out in terms of how would we apply this and let's take a look at one specific instance where we can apply this so let me see if I have an example that I can use अच्छा so I think let's just take this example this is a very simple example अब हम किस पे फोकस करें हम फोकस करें किसके ऊपर हम फोकस करें on our character which has the actor which has the name board so now let's take a look at the board how would you describe the state of the board अगर मैं आपसे ये पूछूं this is my question and think about it for a second मैं आपके सामने दो बोर्ड रख दूं ये एक बोर्ड है एंड एक बोर्ड आपके पास पीछे था जो आपने यहां पे देखा था जहां से हमने कहानी स्टार्ट की थी ये आपका बोर्ड है राइट सो इस पे क्या वर्ड्स पड़े हुए इसमें आयॉन्स शोल रैम्स ये तीन अल्फाज लिखे हुए हैं इसके ऊपर राइट सो देयर आर थ्री words that have been placed on this board this is one board and इस बोर्ड के साथ क्या मिला आपको इस बोर्ड के साथ आपको ये स्लेट मिली है ये रैक मिला है ऑफ MOOENTU right this is your rack how does this board and this slate compare with this board and this slate now for a second don't think like a Scrabble player for a second just think in terms of how much information is there on both the boards what is information which is common across both the boards कुछ चीजें तो कॉमन है ना कॉमन क्या चीज है कॉमन ये चीज है कि जी ये भी जो है 15 बाय 15 का है और ये भी 15 बाय 15 का है जो उसके अंदर स्पेशल टाइल्स हैं द नंबर ऑफ स्पेशल टाइल्स नंबर ऑफ स्पेशल टाइल्स तो सेम है. The number of tiles that are available may be different, but the original number of tiles, the actual number of tiles that you started the game with, वो तो सेम है, वो तो चेंज नहीं होंगे. वो टाइल्स कहाँ हैं, वो भी चेंज नहीं होंगे. So अगर we already have this information with respect to the tiles, कि टाइल्स कहाँ हैं और कहाँ जा रहे हैं और चेंज नहीं होंगे, तो we also have some clarity, we have some sense of how information that represents the state of the board should be captured and stored. अगर आप इंफॉर्मेशन के बारे में सोचें तो जो इंफॉर्मेशन आपके पास मौजूद है उसमें से इंफॉर्मेशन दो हिस्सों में. एक है स्टैटिक इंफॉर्मेशन. स्टैटिक इंफॉर्मेशन क्या है? स्टैटिक इंफॉर्मेशन इज दैट द बोर्ड इज ऑफ 15 by 15. ये स्टैटिक इंफॉर्मेशन है. बोर्ड में 225 स्क्वायर्स हैं, ये स्टैटिक इंफॉर्मेशन है. बोर्ड में इतने स्पेशल टाइल्स हैं या इतने स्क्वायर्स हैं, और टाइल्स इतने स्क्वायर्स हैं. द बोर्ड हैज सो मेनी स्क्वायर्स, राइट? So this is also consistent. This information does not change. And then there is information that changes, and this would essentially be what you'd call dynamic information. Information that changes from one state of play to the next. What is that information? That information is this. बोर्ड पे कितने टाइल्स प्लेस, आपने कितने टाइल्स प्लेस कर दिए हैं बोर्ड के ऊपर. And as the game progresses, the number of tiles on the board goes up, and the number of open available tiles that are available on the board comes down, right? So हमने ये क्या किया, ये हमने क्या डिस्क्राइब किया, हमने बोर्ड का सिर्फ डेटा पार्ट डिस्क्राइब किया है. हम किस फ्रेमवर्क को फॉलो करें? हम एनालिसिस के फ्रेमवर्क को फॉलो करें, राइट? सो आपका एनालिसिस फ्रेमवर्क क्या कहता है? वो कहता है कि जी मुझे आप स्टोरीज सुनाएं. स्टोरीज कैसे सुनाएं? बाय आइडेंटिफाइंग एक्टर्स, their attributes, their function, their relationships, their hierarchy, their engagement and their behavior. हम इस फ्रेमवर्क को इस्तेमाल करें. इस फ्रेमवर्क को इस्तेमाल करके क्या करें? इस फ्रेमवर्क को इस्तेमाल करके हम बोर्ड को एनालाइज करें, हम बोर्ड की स्टेट को एनालाइज करें. हाउ डज द स्टेट ऑफ दिस बोर्ड चेंज? एंड इन दिस बोर्ड अगेन व्हाट वी हैव डन इज वी सेड कि देयर आर टू पीसेस ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन. एक ये है, देयर आर टू पीसेस ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन. एक ये है कि बोर्ड कितना बड़ा है, एंड ये है कि जी बोर्ड को आप कैसे डिस्क्राइब कर सकते हैं. ये चेंज नहीं होती. एक और इंफॉर्मेशन है does not relate to the board but that relates to the number of tiles that are placed in the board, right? ये भी इंफॉर्मेशन स्टैटिक है, ये भी चेंज नहीं होती from one state to the next. This is constant. जो आपको स्लेट मिलती है ये चेंज होती है. जो रैक मिलता है आपको, the collection of tiles that you get that you have to make work with, this changes. And when this changes, what happens? You can change the state of the board. अच्छा, so अब आपने पहला काम क्या किया? आपने सिर्फ information compression identify किए. Now the question is how do you put this compression to work? So when the state of the board change, what changes? From a relevance perspective, what are we really interested in? What we're interested in, can we use the change in the state of the board to identify one thing and only one thing? And what is that one thing? That one thing is the probability of winning. Can I use the state of the board to identify what is the likelihood, what is the possibility, what is the probability that I will win or that I will lose? ये क्या है? ये बोर्ड इवैल्यूएशन का कैरेक्टर है. और ये किसके साथ इंटरैक्ट कर रहा है? ये बोर्ड के साथ इंटरैक्ट कर रहा है. आप याद है जब एआई की बात की थी, ऊपर जब बात की थी एआई की, तो हमने कहा था कि जी देयर इज अ बोर्ड इवैल्यूएशन का फंक्शन, सॉरी देयर इज अ बोर्ड इवैल्यूएशन का कैरेक्टर, नॉट अ फंक्शन. देयर इज अ बोर्ड इवैल्यूएशन कैरेक्टर. वो क्या करता है? उसको आप बोर्ड देते हैं, उसको आप कुछ और इन्फॉर्मेशन देते हैं इन एडिशन टू द बोर्ड. वो दोनों पीसेस में लेता है, एंड व्हाट डज इट डू? इट कम्स बैक एंड सेज इन माय ओपिनियन this board and this game is right now favoring none of the two players, favoring the AI, favoring the human player. And my read right now is that, as far as I'm concerned, there is a reasonable chance that the AI is going to win this game. Is waqt, right now, at the current state of the game, I don't think we have enough data to make a call on who's going to win the game. We have some sense if we get a sense of what the scores are and and what do the tiles on both sides look like. But right now at this state, we can't. There's not enough information. But as the game progresses, there is a clear point, there's a clear stage where the game can be called out in favor of one or the other player. So far so good. यहां तक बात समझ में आ गई? हम जो आपने बात कही ना कि आप दोबारा बता दें, एक दफा दोबारा कवर कर लें, हम उसी चीज को दोबारा कवर करें. कैसे कवर करें? विद एन एग्जांपल. सो वी हैव नॉट गॉन बैक टू द ओरिजिनल स्लाइड्स. वी सिंपली building up on the concept placed and expressing it or explaining it from the perspective of an example. And the example is what? Board evaluation. Does that help? Does that make sense? कबीर, आर यू ओके? डज दैट हेल्प? तुम्हारी समझ में आ गया? तुम्हें सवाल पूछा था, एक दफा कवर कवर कर लें. सो बासित, यू हैव अ वेरी वैलिड क्वेश्चन. इस दफा जो आपके जहन में, इस दफा जो आपके इसमें सबमिशन की रिक्वायरमेंट है, वो रिक्वायरमेंट ये है कि आप ये जो स्टोरी बनाई ना हमने, हम स्क्रैबल की बात कर रहे थे ना, तो जब हम स्क्रैबल की बात कर रहे थे तो हमने यहाँ पे क्या किया है, ये एक स्टोरी है, राइट? सो नाउ देयर आर अदर वेज ऑफ शोकेसिंग एंड प्लेसिंग एंड representing these stories. This is just one possible way of representing stories. ये जो आप स्टोरी रिप्रेजेंट करें, सो फॉर एग्जांपल आपने कैरेक्टर्स बनाए, आपने एक्टर्स आइडेंटिफाई किए, आपने उन एक्टर्स के बिहेवियर आइडेंटिफाई किए, और आपने जब एक्टर्स और बिहेवियर को साथ में मिलाया तो आपकी स्टोरी बन गई. सो आप एक स्लाइड पे एक स्टोरी कवर कर लें, एंड यू कैन यूज one slide of text to describe the story. So now you will actually have text and stories. You'll have text and visuals together, where it would not be a wordy description. Your visuals should essentially show you everything that you need to see, and the words will explain, provide background context. So not necessarily a flow chart. अब आप जो present करेंगे, no, so not necessarily a flow chart. What you have to do is, देखिए, मैंने खास तौर पे जानबूझ के आपसे नहीं कहा था शुरू में कि आप फ्लो चार्ट इस्तेमाल करें. अब आप क्या करें, अब आप कैरेक्टर्स, रोल्स और बिहेवियर्स को इस्तेमाल करके अपने डिजाइन को अपडेट करें. जी, these are instructions for all the sections, for all 3 sections I'm teaching. So 2.1, 2.2 and 2.5. अच्छा जी, let's see. All right. So this was our example of looking at the board and analyzing the board as an instance of digging into how an actor could be described, the state of an actor could be described, and how elements and things and engagements and interactions and behavior change the state of that actor, right? So अब हमने एक एग्जाम्पल जो ली वो हमने ली किस चीज की ली, वो हमने ली बोर्ड एवेल्यूएशन की, और हमने एक एग्जाम्पल ली वर्ड जनरेशन की, एक हमने एग्जाम्पल ली वर्ड जनरेशन की with respect to generating words. But now let's say if I have a slate of words on and I have this character on the board which is move, each of the cells or squares around these characters that are open is a possible anchor for the word. So now my next question to you is, अगर मेरे पास 7 tiles हैं और ये 4 अल्फाज हैं, so when I generate the combination of words, what should I include? Should I just include the tiles on my rack, or should I also include these possible anchors on the board? जब आप वर्ड जनरेट करने जाएंगे तो your word should have just the tiles, or should it also have the possible openings, the hooks, the links that exist on the board that you will use to place your word on the board? What do you think is going to happen? एक करेंगे, दोनों इस्तेमाल करेंगे? You need to use both, right? So जब आप combination generate करेंगे, yeah, you would generate more words, but also because अगर तुमने सिर्फ isolation में अपने tiles इस्तेमाल करके word generate कर लिया and you don't have a correct link or a connector or an anchor, then you would not know how to place it. And it's not necessary that your word will start or end. It could have these anchors in the middle, and that's a different kind of a problem, right? So you can just evaluate anchors that are on the outside, anchors where you start or end. Finding out words where the anchor is in the middle of the word that you've identified is a much harder problem. Question you have to ask yourself is that if I have a list of anchors, that start, so let's say if I have a list of words that start with M. So I have a list of words that start with M. And I have a list of words that start with E. And I have a list of words that, let's say, end with E. And a list of words that end with M. You may have two choices. So these are words, this one and this one. These are both words that start. And this one and this one. These are words that end. And I call this my list A, and I'll call it my list B. And then I have a third list. Not B. I have a third list, and the third list is C. And what is C? C is a list where the word that I have picked has M and E in the middle. So this is start, end, and somewhere in the middle of my word, these characters exist. Now, my question to you is, think about this for a second. If you're making an actor that places a word on the board, and that actor is searching for possible combinations where the word starts with M and E or ends with M and E, how would that function? How would the work? How would the behavior of that actor change when you're searching for a word where the anchor is in the middle? What would need to change? This is a thinking question. ये सोचने वाला सवाल है. Use this as a test to test yourself to answer the very simple question: do you understand this well enough for you to apply it? And when you express this in terms of what? Actor roles and behavior. Actors, roles and behavior. कैसे करेंगे? अच्छा, so okay, so let me restate the question. देखिए, एक simple word ले लें आप. Give me words that begin with M and give me words that end with E. So, for example, words that begin with M. Any word, we're not looking at straight, any word that begins with M. So let's say many is a word that begins with M, starts with N. And let's say end is a word that begins with E, right? ये अल्फाज कहाँ आएंगे? ये अल्फाज लिस्ट नंबर ए में आएंगे. ठीक है? So far so good. Then I have a word and I call this word tandem. Tandem. This is a word that ends at M. You see this? Ends at M. ये कहाँ पे आएगा? ये list B में आएगा. But tandem में you can see that E is not at the end and not at the start. E is somewhere in the word. ये कहाँ पे आएगा? So from E perspective, tandem will also fall in list number C as far as E is concerned. Does that make sense? So you understand what the problem is? How do the three lists differ? List number A is a list that starts with M. List number B is a list that ends with M. List number C is a list that has either E or M in the middle, not at the start or at the end. Are you clear about the three lists? How are the three lists different from each other? So now the question to you, and this is the question that I'm asking you to think about. The question to you is, how would the search, when you generate the words, right? When you generate the words and you actually have a list of anchors that you can use to place the word on the board, how would the search for a valid move change when you are searching to place a letter on start or a letter at end? So, you have this function, you have this character, you have this actor. उसका काम क्या है? उसका काम is to identify the optimal move. So आपने अगर आप story सोचें, if you think in terms of the story, from a story perspective, what are you saying? You're saying step number 1, where's the story? Oh, let's go back. हमारे पास एक्टर्स कहाँ है? हमारे पास एक्टर्स की लिस्ट ये एक्टर्स की लिस्ट है, राइट? सो अब आप क्या कह रहे हैं? मेरे पास एक फंक्शन है, एक एक्टर है, कैरेक्टर है, उसका नाम है प्लेस वर्ड. वो क्या करता है? प्लेस वर्ड finds the most optimal move, ये move, finds the most optimal move and places that move where it places the move on the board on behalf of a player. यहां तो बात क्लियर होगी. सो हमारे पास कैरेक्टर कौन सा है, एक्टर कौन सा है? उसका नाम है प्लेस वर्ड. प्लेस वर्ड क्या करता है? प्लेस वर्ड ऑप्टिमल मूव प्लेस करता है बोर्ड पे ऑन बिहाफ ऑफ द प्लेयर. Which means what? Which means that someone has given him, this place word character, a list of moves. And what does he do? He selects the optimal move from that list of moves. So जब वो list of moves में से move select करता है तो कैसे select करता है? It takes all the moves that it has been given and it sorts them, in what form? Higher score perspective. अब उस higher score perspective में would it only look at letters in list A, would only look at words in list B, or would also look at words in list C? And if it finds a word in list C, how does it find it? तो यहाँ पे तो बहुत सिंपल है ना, ये जो मॉडल, ये तो बहुत सिंपल है, राइट? इसमें तमाम वो वर्ड्स देख लें जिसका लास्ट लेटर एम है, तमाम वो वर्ड्स देख लें जिसका लास्ट लेटर ई है, तमाम वो वर्ड्स देख लें. सो गो बैक, लिस्ट नंबर ए इज तमाम वो वर्ड्स देखें दैट स्टार्ट विद एम और स्टार्ट विद ई. लिस्ट नंबर बी, तमाम वो वर्ड्स देखें जो फिनिश करते हैं एम और ई से. यहां पे हम पूछ रहे हैं टैंडम, दिस वर्ड TANDEM, ये वर्ड, इसमें ई मिडल में, ये वर्ड कैसे आएगा हमारे पास? From a move placement point of view, from a word placement point of view on the board. Yes, that is true. There could be a word. So you'll have, the reason what you're saying is you have a list of possible words that have all the words on your slate, and then you want to sort that list into 3 separate lists. एक is list A, एक is list B, एक is list C. List A में तमाम words start होते हैं, list B में तमाम words end होते हैं, and list C में तमाम words बीच में. So far so good? Do you now understand the question? सवाल क्या है? सवाल है कि आपके पास एक एक्टर है, वो एक्टर क्या करता है? वो एक्टर ऑप्टिमल मूव प्लेस करता है बोर्ड के ऊपर. उस एक्टर के पास 3 लिस्टें हैं, लिस्ट ए है, लिस्ट बी है, लिस्ट सी है. Using the framework that we've described, which is the actor behavior role framework and the images that we've described, right? What do? Tell me the story of how does list C works. Yeah, so the right way to do this is, it's time for your short break. हमने क्लास 9 बजे स्टार्ट की थी, 10:15 बजे. So I'll give you a 10-minute break. ये 10 मिनट की ब्रेक में आप पानी पी लें, चल लें, सांस ले लें, बाहर देख कर आ जाएं. मौसम बहुत अच्छा हो रहा है. It looks very nice from the inside. मौसम बाहर देख कर आ जाएं and सोचें इसके बारे में. And then what I want you to do is draw it out on a piece of paper. I don't want you to write words yet. I just want you to draw it out on a piece of paper. How would the process change? What is the work involved in finding a match in list C? ठीक है? So अभी टाइम हो रहा है हमारे पास 10:19. It's 19 minutes after 10. I'll give you 15 minutes. So 20 लगा लें, 10, 20. So let's meet at 10:35. The room will stay open. I'm just going to mute myself and stop the screen sharing. No, 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 no. E and M can be in the same way. This is male example दी ना उन्होंने. So when you look at the example of male, M-A-L-E, so there will be overlaps. There will be overlaps in both, in all three lists, depending on which letter you're evaluating it for. So for example, आपके पास E की list है, M की list है, A की list है, O की list है, V की list है. There's a list A, there's a list B, there's a list C for all the letters in your set. Question is, when you think in terms of searching for a match or a word in list C, how would you look for? And this sort of plays into some of the ways that come into play जब आप ultimately later on in the course when you start thinking in terms of how to build a AI for Scrabble. हाँ, तो इसके बारे में सोचें. Don't think in terms of the algorithm. First think in terms of the story. पहले कहानी सोचें, उसके बाद आए. जी जी, गजना we can do that. मैं अब जो हमारी पिछले एक ट्यूटोरियल है और एक पहले लेक्चर की रिकॉर्डिंग ऑलरेडी यूट्यूब के ऊपर पड़ी हुई है. आई विल शेयर दोस लिंक्स विद यू. Okay, ji, so let's take a break, 15 minutes, and we'll meet back here at 10:35. आप भी इसके ऊपर काम करें, list C के ऊपर, and I will also try and see if I can build a story around list C. Okay, so I'll see you in 15 minutes. Thank you.